Hi, I'm Megan, and you're listening to Two White Girls, stumbling through the current political and social climate. Hey everybody, it's Megan and Katie. We are back. Happy January.
Happy New Year!
Woo woo! 2019. It's our first podcast of 2019. We are really excited to be back with again talking about the war on poverty. Our next couple of episodes will be focusing on the war on poverty. Last episode, we did talk a little bit about anti-poverty economy stimulators. Dun dun dun.
Hashtag that phrase forever.
It's a thing. It's a thing, Regina George. And we're making it a thing. But really, those are government assistance. And I think right now, especially with the government shutdown, if you didn't listen to that last podcast and you're not familiar with all of the wonderful programs that our government does provide to people, I would definitely take a listen. Definitely take a listen.
And it is important to note, to tie it to what's currently happening with the government shutdown, that food stamps, otherwise known as, and what everyone else should call it, which is SNAP, it's not actual stamps anymore, y'all. Catch up. The supplemental nutritional, I can't remember.
AP.
Program.
Yay!
Assistance program.
Yeah,
okay,
there it is.
I can do things, I swear. And that program will completely probably run out of money mid-February, if not already. Some states...
The Ohio ones run out. They're not giving it out for February. I know for a fact.
Right. A lot of states did buffer or budget so that they can give... They gave February early.
Yeah, so Ohio gave like half of February early or something like that.
Right.
Which I can't imagine living on half of my money for.
Well, and that's my thing is there's going to be a run on, what is it? Food banks.
Yeah.
And other food suppliers.
If you want to be, not to like totally go on an anecdote, but like if you want to be helpful during the government shutdown, food banks and domestic violence shelters definitely need a lot of assistance. For sure.
Yeah, and I mean, please, I'm just going to say this once, I think, hopefully throughout this entire, no, I'm definitely going to say it in another podcast, but if you're going to donate items,
call first.
Please have them be items that you
needed.
Yourself would want to eat.
Yes, and are needed.
Ask ahead of time. Don't give someone some weird jar of weird things that has been sitting in your pantry for 6 years.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that. Because clearly you don't want it.
And if
you should have eaten it.
If you have a little extra money, just add a little extra to your grocery list and take that. Buy something else, something twice that you are eating or something like that.
Right.
And then for the domestic violence shelters, for sure, call and find out what they need.
Yeah, because they definitely need toiletries. I'll tell you that right now.
Tampons. Go buy some tampons.
Hell yeah.
People definitely need that. Anyway, so awesome.
So moving on.
Thank you, government shutdown. But that is really important, speaking of poverty and just waging a war and the conversations that some of our administration is having about the grocery store will just credit you and things like that. It's clear that if you've not been in this situation before or in a situation of paycheck to paycheck, you really don't know what it's like to and what your options are, which are very little. Which moves us beautifully into what the cycle of poverty is. So today we're going to talk about an actual war that has been waged really since the 1950s, 60s on people in poverty. And really that's trickled up to, and predictably trickled up to the middle class. So this is really a war that today is basically on everybody that isn't a one percenter. But we're going to start there at our poverty limit and below. So a cycle of poverty is really important to understand.
So to kind of we're going to talk about it so you don't have your visual of a circle. But I imagine that since you can listen to this, you can imagine a circle.
Close your eyes unless you're driving.
And the circle starts, yeah, please don't if you're driving. And let's start with the, say, top of the circle, where you're just starting with a household and they're poor. And this doesn't mean they're in a house, okay? A household just refers to a family unit. Like, household is a little misleading of a term because it doesn't necessarily mean someone's in a home necessarily, because again, they could be homeless, they could be living in their car, they could be hopping couch to couch to
Couch,
couch,
yeah, couch surfing.
surfing. There it is. Whatever the case may be, but let's start with our poor, let's say we have a poor single mom with her 2 kids. Let's just, that's what we
Start
have.
there, yeah.
So then you would move to, they don't access to food, water, or school. So when you're poor, you don't have as much access to food, so you have little amounts of food, and whatever food you may have access to may not be great.
Yeah, it's not nutritious.
You're eating ramen that costs 50 cents. Your water may be unclean. Flint.
Flint. So many other places though too.
But like that's just the example that's the most obvious,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately, I'm pretty sure still a thing.
And if it's not, it's very much a thing. And if it's not clean, then you're often sick, which adds to other problems, but we'll get to.
And then for school, you either don't have access to a school close to you, so you have to go out of your way to get access to one, or the schools that you can access are unsanitary, unsafe, have been mistreated by the way our educational system is set up.
Check out our education podcast for more on that.
Yeah. So then you will move along the circle to our third little dot, which Megan kind of alluded to, which is having access to little food, unclean water, or no school or limited school leads to diseases, infections, no energy, and no skills to work.
On both of, I think it's important to know both the parents and the kids feel this way. So adults and children feel that way. So you're not successful at school, and you're not going to be successful at a workplace.
Right. And so for the purposes of this, our example is a mother with 2 children, but you could have a single individual.
Mm-hmm.
It could be an elderly person. Like this applies to any kind of family unit you could possibly have. And so when you have diseases and infections, you are more likely to miss work or miss school, whatever kind of work or whatever kind of school you have access to.
Mm-hmm.
In that same vein, you have no energy, so you're not going to be able to fight off those diseases and infections or have the brain mental stability in order to do your work or go to school.
Yep.
Or to be successful in school. And because of all of those things, you're not building your skills to upskill and to become better at work, or
you're not even thinking ahead.
Learn this. Yeah, you're not. There's no.
You're thinking about
long-term planning.
Yeah, you're thinking about how I'm getting through the rest of today because I'm exhausted.
Right, and it's not even short-term planning. There's literally no planning.
No, it's just
so you've no
30
skills.
seconds at a time.
You're sick and you have no skills and you're tired.
Yep.
Then that all leads to our fourth in our circle is low productivity. So if you're sick, I mean, come on, we've all been there. I'm not doing anything. I literally can't. But like, you have to get up and go to work, or you have to go do these things. Or if your kids are sick, where do you take them? What are you doing? Your productivity is so low that you can't actually move and achieve anything else. So then you're not going to be like, I'm going to find a new job, or I'm going to find a new school, or I'm going to do XYZ.
30 seconds at a time.
You can't. Sick. You can't move through it.
Yeah.
Which then leads to low or no income. So you have no money to access things that at a upper class level you could achieve. So for example, if we're separating these out a little bit, if you have a wealthier family where they have access to better food, clean water, and a safer school, they then will get less diseases, less infections, have more energy, and be able to build their skills, which leads to higher productivity, which leads to more money. So when you don't have those building blocks necessary, you literally aren't going to be making any money, and you can't get out of that rut of not making any money. So then what happens if you're sick and you're tired, your kids are sick and tired, you're not able to do anything, you can't make any long-term plans. You move on to the next bit of the cycle of poverty, which is your
Yeah,
self-esteem.
depression.
You have no personal control. You can't get out of what you're in. You're trapped.
And it's a
So
constant state of, I think, frustration, is what I've
absolutely.
typically seen people in. So when you do see people that are, at their wits' end, whether it's tears or screaming or whatever, that's that's that cycle of I am exhausted. Think about standing in line at the DMV. I always think about this. Think about standing in line at the DMV for your entire life, and that is really what the cycle of poverty feels like,
Oh,
because you're constantly going through
oh,
these stupid either bureaucratic systems or just, I mean, levels of exhaustion, from taking your kids to the ER or the urgent care for too much money because they're sick and you're sick, and not getting to work and getting fussed at by your boss because you didn't get to work, or your kid's school called while you were at work, when you all these things spiral and you just feel angry.
and then also, if you have a low self-esteem, you have no personal control, you end up making horrible choices for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't deserve that, so I'm not going to do it.
Right. And I also don't deserve to be treated a certain way. I don't deserve, um, my children don't deserve it. Like, you start to fall into this really deep rut with that, which then can lead to our next point, which is it leads to high child births, meaning more children are born in this cycle.
Way more.
I think it's super interesting, because if you can plan it, well, if you can't plan it, you don't have access to condoms, you can't afford them, you don't have access to birth control.
And again, you're stuck in a cycle of 30 seconds at a time. So what feels good for this 30 seconds? Sex feels good
Exactly.
for this 30 seconds. I don't have time or money or interest to go get a condom. I'm having sex right now. So I do know a lot of families that I work with have upwards of 9, 10 kids.
Definitely.
Because they are, that's a mindset that we're all in. And it's the same with drinking or things like that. Like, if I'm having a bad day, I'm definitely going to be like, all right, I need a drink. Well, if you have a bad day every single day, that's going to spiral to some things and some abuse of some things, because what makes you feel good right then? You need to feel good right then.
Exactly. And then also, along with that, is that you could have sick parents, sick grandparents that are also trapped in this cycle with you, that you also have to take care of as well. Because they also are maybe 50, 60 years old, and they're on SSI or some other kind of, disability benefits, because they can't work, because they're so sick, because they've always been sick their entire life, because they've had little food, unclean water, and
I mean, aren't you
maybe
tired
not been
just
able
hearing
to
about all
heal
this?
themselves. Like,
Yeah.
I'm tired already.
Yeah.
And so then all of this leads to you have more dependents.
Yep.
You have more people who you have to take care of while you are also
Exhausted.
going along this path.
Yes. And the other thing with the high childbirths is, if you don't have access to adequate medical care while you are pregnant, your child is potentially, or you, going to have pregnancy or preterm labor complications or post-birth complications, which means more time at the hospital, more time at the doctor, more time exhausted. I mean, I'm thinking of one family in particular. I think they're at 11 kids now, and the 11th kid spent a ton of time in the hospital, to the point where the mom couldn't get anything else done, because we were trying to bring her into school for some stuff. And she literally could get nothing else done because she's at the hospital. Her husband's at home with all these kids, and they also have grandma living with them. So it's just like this huge spirally effect of, like you said, the total exhaustion.
And so then we're completing our circle and going back to, you have a poor household, you have a poor family unit, and everyone is living in the same situation again. So the anti-poverty economy stimulators are really looking at the second and third points, which are the food, water, school, kind of, Diseases, infections, no energies, and no skills to work. A lot of those are targeting access in that way. So, SNAP, as we discussed earlier with the government shutdown, is important. And in our last podcast, we went in depth on why it's important
Nutrition.
for people to have adequate nutrition,
And why it's important for the economy.
Why it's important for access to medical care, because preventative medical care leads to
Again,
better workers.
The economy.
So the cycle of poverty, when we're discussing it, people are trapped in this. Like, and then while they're trapped in this, they're trying to look for ways out, but they're not looking at long term. They're looking at short term. What can make me enough money to get XYZ? And XYZ is like how to move out of this neighborhood I've lived in my entire life, my entire family's lived in, or how do I get a car so I can get this better job, or, you know, whatever. And then they end up blowing it on something else, or God forbid something happens to a family member or themselves.
Or you get a flat tire and it's $150. There it goes.
Right. And I mean, the systems aren't built to help people get out of those cycle of poverty. And that's why people also have this misconception of the anti-poverty economy stimulators, you know, government assistance, guys. The reason people have this misconception that everyone's just on them all the time because, you know, they don't have to work, they don't have to do these things. No. They're trapped in them.
Because they're only built to maintain the cycle and not get worse.
Right.
This is going to help you not get worse and not get lower. It's not going to help you forward function. So if you want forward functioning, you need to look at more progressive anti-poverty economy stimulators than the ones that we already have.
Exactly. The ones that we have are hard to access. There has been more of a focus lately on employment, so like upskilling.
Yes.
Workers and different things like that. Like there's so much going on about, you know,
even
those kind of things, but
looking
it's really
at trades and
body.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
How can we help kids all over?
Right. Yeah, and there is an obvious like, oh my God, we have this gap of like we don't have plumbers. Like all of a sudden we don't have them. And it's like, I wonder why we don't have them, guys. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I just want to make it clear that having this misconception about other people that you don't know, you've never understood, you have never walked a mile in their shoes, you've just watched a movie, watched the news, heard some nonsense, you know, maybe when you were, you know, maybe 20, 30 years ago, you saw someone using food stamps, whatever. You need to go back to, you don't understand what they're dealing with at home, if they have a home, any of those situations. So it's kind of like, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, when I was in college, a group from the city of Dayton, I can't remember who they are, like what they represented, but there was a group that would come and do the poverty simulation. Did you ever do this simulation with the Center for Social Concern?
I don't think so.
I only did it because I worked for the Center for Social Concern. So every year I worked it. But people would come in and you would have like all these different government agencies, and you had a school and you had a daycare and you had a job and that, like all these other things, and everyone would get a household, like you said, and it would tell you what your assets were, if you had a house or an apartment, or if you were homeless or in your car or whatever. And then you would have like, I think there were like 2-minute days. So you were like getting 2 minutes to get everything done that you needed to do. So it was like drop your kids off at school, get them like blah, blah, blah. And then all these things would start to happen. Like your kid gets suspended at school, so you have to pick them up, which means that you get fired from your job, which means that you don't make it over to... Sorry, my daughter was saying goodnight to me. Good night, Charlie Joe. You don't make it over to the government assistance office to get your SNAP that month because they didn't mail it to you, because you had to move, because you were kicked out, like whatever. And all it is 2 minutes of watching people just race around like chickens with their heads cut off, and nobody got anywhere. And the only people who were successful at all were the people who went to the church and got some money from the church. But that wasn't even well advertised. They just happened to stumble upon and be like, what do you guys do? So I think it's just important to note that it really is just like, think of your worst nightmare bureaucracy day where you're just running around trying to get the tags for your car and you have to go to 4 different places,
Oh my gosh.
as on top of all the other things you have to do. Think of that worst day, and that is a cycle of poverty every single day. Not to mention you have a cold or pneumonia on top of that. That's the cycle of poverty every single day. And if you're not tired right now, I don't know what to tell you, because I'm tired thinking about it.
Right, and a good example of this was the documentary I mentioned on the post, which the name of it is escaping me. But it's following a young woman with children who is trapped in the cycle of poverty. It's a really good just illustration to have a human example, and I so recommend watching it. I know it's on HBO and everybody doesn't have that, but like, figure it out. It's on. Maybe it's on. I'll find YouTube another one somewhere.
YouTube in parts.
Yeah. It's such a good. A good example.
And anyway. I think even if you do break out of the cycle of poverty, like I will, not to put like his life on blast, but my husband did break his family's cycle of poverty. His family is working on breaking their cycle of poverty through honestly a series of luck, and now my husband reaps the benefits of my privilege. So that's, like its own story. I don't think that everyone can break their cycle of poverty, obviously. But he did. However, you still have those mindsets, and he's been breaking himself of the lack of planning and future planning mindset for a really long time. So when we graduated from college, it was really hard for him to plan, to plan for our future, whether it was saving money or thinking about his career in the sense of what do you want to do with your life, not just what do you want to do to bring home the paycheck tomorrow. That's been a huge struggle, our whole relationship. And he's doing, like, obviously 8 years out, we're doing pretty well. And he's doing well, and he has career goals now, but that was really tied to his self-esteem. So even if you do break that cycle of poverty, it can be hard to not slide back just because you have so much trouble thinking about a career in that way, or making lots of money, or not only just making lots of money, but chasing your bliss, if you will, in a position that you enjoy and that you're good at, if that makes sense. So even thinking about people who break out of the cycle of poverty, that self-esteem and that no personal control stays with them forever. It does. It's really traumatizing. So that's just a thought there. Just a thought there.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to say that we'll be touching on race again, as we always do. Can't help it. Can't stop it.
Can't.
But
affects so many things. Everything.
When describing a cycle of poverty, anyone can be trapped in that cycle.
Yes.
So.
Anyone.
It doesn't matter.
All the people. In fact, I think there are more white people in the cycle of poverty than there are any other race.
I don't know the statistics on that.
I'm pretty sure, but I would have to double check myself now. But last time I checked, it was more white people. Okay, so we're gonna take a quick break, and afterwards we're gonna go into some of the laws that have been created to really work against people in poverty. Anti-homelessness legislation, bail bond systems, and then kind of start touching on our next situation with the war on poverty. So stay tuned for our break, and we'll be right back.
Hi, you've been listening to Two White Girls. We just want to take this time to talk about our blog and what is available on it. We send out tons of resources, different books or movies to watch, different things to catch up on everything that we're talking about. You can also follow us at our Twitter handle, which is at 2whitegirlshow1, and you can tweet at us. You can see what things we're tweeting about, what's going on in the world, and in a faster pace than our typical podcast. Also, if you would like to be a guest on our show, shoot us an email at 2whitegirlshow@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. And we're back.
Hello.
From outer space. I was going to start singing a song. It's fine. Don't worry about me. So, breaking off from the cycle of poverty, but not really, because it all ties back. Um, we're going to talk about some of the anti-homeless legislation, because when we're discussing the cycle of poverty, we made it very clear that just because the word poor household is, or the word household is used, doesn't mean you have one. And being impoverished definitely means your housing situation is vulnerable. And who is very vulnerable are people who are homeless, meaning they don't have a home. And you can be homeless crashing with people and couch surfing, and you don't have a place of your
A
own.
permanent residence.
That is homeless. So many people can be homeless, whether or not they know it, or they say it, or they understand it. But what's really important, and something I didn't honestly realize was as horrible as it is the amount of anti-homeless legislation
Tons.
that is in our country. And I mean, excuse me, it's state by state, city by city, all of that kind of context. But, and especially it's like larger cities. But I pulled up a study when I was researching from the National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty, where they were trying to find solutions to address the causes of homelessness. You know, like how for some reason there's certain political party and certain people in that party that always like to bring up homeless people or homeless veterans and about how they should be supporting them. Well, here is an organization that's literally trying to do that.
Literally
just
trying
saying.
to do that.
Just saying. Just throwing that out
and
there.
And veterans and mental health are a huge reason as to why people are homeless. So is domestic violence.
Definitely. So, just throwing that out there. So they're trying to address the causes, not the symptom, and then work to, to find out how to fix it, and then excuse me, I am jumbling all over. Put legislation in place to address the larger context of poverty, because homelessness is such a, not necessarily, I don't want to use the word obvious, but such a easy pinpoint of what extreme or just low income poverty looks like, in that you can lose your home
very quickly.
So quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the legislation, it's really focused on public places. And go ahead.
I was just going to say it's focused on people being in public places, like homeless residing in public places. And so the reason why people will tell you that these are in place, that homelessness laws are the very first protest that I ran myself, actually, after my immigration protest in high school.
Yeah, girl.
And when I talked to the cops who were laughing at my 17-year-old self protesting them and their homelessness laws, anti-homelessness laws in Cincinnati, they felt very strongly that these laws of banning people in public places, to be in public places, sleep in public places, were in place for the safety of the rest of the population, because they said, well, a lot of people who are homeless are mentally ill, and a lot of people who are homeless can become violent, or they're bothering you because they want money. And I guess my rebuttal to that, before we kind of get into the statistics of why I feel like these laws are extremely wrong, is because we have a high number of non-homeless people who are violent and mentally ill, or running around with guns and saying, I'm going to shoot girls because I've never had sex. I think that was the latest one that we heard on Twitter.
Or, they're rapists who get off on
casual, 6 months.
3 months of whatever.
I feel like we're, just spitballing here. But there are no laws in place to protect us from, say, a guy that looks like, just some white guy on the street. There are no laws in place that say he can't be there just because he's white, and there are a lot of white guys shooting up places right now. And there shouldn't be. I'm not advocating for let's start having laws based on people looking like they're going to shoot up or hurt someone in the public. Therefore, we should also not have laws based on the idea that a homeless person may or may not become violent, because just like any other person, they are people. So they have different stories and different backgrounds. Some may or may not become violent. Some may not. It just depends on the person. So when you're making laws blanket statement on people, you forget that they're individuals and they have individual stories, if that makes
And I think
sense.
it also comes down to what they want is to get hide the problem, not
Yes.
solve it.
It's because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to look at somebody
Mm-hmm.
and realize that they are in that situation. And I never want to advocate for you having to do something with your money that you're not comfortable doing. Or, you know, especially with
No.
panhandling and things like that. But I do just advocate for treating someone like a human and just
Mm-hmm.
smiling, nodding the way that you
Yeah,
would
I definitely smile. I
in
smile all
any
the time.
other.
I smile
Yeah.
at a bunch of.
Or if you
I mean,
don't.
I'm in Baltimore, so I smile at every time I'm driving, every red light. Hi, how you
Yeah.
doing?
Well, and I like if you don't smile, then don't smile, but just treating people like human beings. But let's
Seeing
get down
them,
into the yeah.
just I see you. That's
Yes,
important.
I see
That's
you.
that's valuable.
Exactly.
And that's also a really great organization that I'll probably put in the blog later. Um, so the statistics I found that I just thought would be interesting to our beautiful listeners, love ya, are just kind of how they're lumped into certain spaces. And I mean, it's all public, but it's what you're doing in this space. So, camping. So, we've all seen or heard of tent cities or areas where homeless people can stay and feel kind of safe. That isn't necessarily rental or something like that. So there are 34% of cities that do impose citywide bans on camping in public completely. So a third of cities in the United States have imposed citywide bans on this. So there's nowhere for them to camp. What if the homeless shelter is full? What if they
And it
don't know
usually
that there's a
is.
homeless shelter available?
What if they don't feel safe in that homeless shelter? There is a great study on violence
Yes.
in homelessness shelters, especially
Uh-huh.
when it comes to rape, incest, things like that.
Uh-huh. Yep. Um, and then there are laws prohibiting camping in public, um, in particular public spaces. So, like, probably more along the lines of parks, larger public spaces. I'm sure some of them are targeting, like, underpasses as well. But there are 57% of cities in the United States have prohibited camping in particular public spaces.
Which means that
So
you
that's
can
like,
get arrested for doing this.
exactly. And you have nowhere to go. So, okay, I can't set up a sheet on some sticks or something. Or if I have a tent for real, I don't even know how you got it, but a tarp, whatever
Some
you find, a
kind.
trash bag.
I can't put my sleeping bag in this area.
Right. So then on top of this camping, there are also laws prohibiting sleeping in public. Literally, if they catch you, I'm assuming in any public space, which is
Including
by
the
law,
subway, the bus, public transportation.
18% of cities in the United States have imposed citywide bans on sleeping in public. And then in particular in public parks, it ticks up to 27%. So almost a third of cities in the United States have prohibited sleeping in public places, specifically parks. So, okay, I can't just like take a snoozle on a bench because I also can't camp anywhere. I can't just take a nap on a bench real quick so I can get some energy to possibly try to find a friend, to possibly try to find a place to sleep, or to, beg to have enough money in order to get a temporary hotel or pay someone to stay somewhere or do something like that. There are laws prohibiting begging in public. So, in general, 24% of cities in the United States have imposed citywide bans on begging, just in general. And then, in particular public spaces, it's 76% of cities in the United States have prohibited
So that's a
begging.
vast majority. Vast.
Most cities.
And again,
I would say
you would say go ahead.
I would say it really depends on the space. Because I don't know about you, Megan, from when I was in Dayton, there were always people at popular stop corners, like red
Yes.
light
Yes.
corners.
Yes.
But in Baltimore, it's every single one. And I don't necessarily get asked for money on the street, like walking, but I'm not saying I don't every time either. But when I'm thinking about it, it's never like I'm at a park and someone comes up to me asking me. It's more of like in Dayton, it was either I'm in the parking lot
Or I'm at
walking
the
to or from my
stoplight.
car. Yeah. So it is. I mean, it is this banning of if you
Certain
try to ask
spaces.
someone for money, it's not going to happen for you.
And again, I'm not advocating for anyone to do anything with money that they're not comfortable with, and I'm happy in the blog.
Totally.
I will in the blog write about what I do when someone asks me for that situation, because I do, again, live in Dayton. There's a ton of people, and a ton of people connected to the opioid crisis, which is always people's big, like, oh my God, they're going to go buy drugs. So that some alternatives or just mindsets that I have that might be helpful to people, I can write about that in the blog. But the point is, you can be arrested for this and you have nowhere to go. You have no money. We'll get to bail bonds in a second.
It's also a bed though
sense
to get arrested.
What? It's also it is. We can go there.
It is a bed.
Orange the New Black goes there a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. But I think it's just important to note that we're creating a barrier of no options. Like, Katie did a really nice job of outlining, so I can't camp and I can't sleep in public, but I can't ask for money, and we're going to keep going down and down and down and down, where you're just creating this situation where people have no options, where they can just exist. Their existence is illegal.
Right. And so, okay, so I can't ask for money. So I'm going to, I know certain public places I can't sleep in. So I'm going to just, try and take a snoozle, over in this back alley and hope, don't die, whatever. But I'm just going to go and try.
But 53% of cities prohibit you sitting or lying down in public places as well. So, no, Katie.
So
you can't do that either if you're sitting for too long. I mean, literally, I want to know what that ticket looks like. He was sitting too long.
Right, and I'm like, what's your measurement?
Yeah, what is the measurement for
So
my
stood
feet are
there.
Tired? Are you going to tell the pregnant woman who's sitting down for 20 seconds that she can't sit there? I'm confused. Who are we telling?
Yeah, and I'm also like, so did you waste an hour watching if this dude got up?
Yeah, did you keep driving by the corner to see if he stood up
don't
or
have
not?
Anything better to do.
Yeah. I mean, clearly not. And that's what I think kind of what it becomes, or at least what I experienced in Cincinnati when I was protesting these laws, because they were fairly new in Cincinnati when I was in high school, was that cops really would kind of just follow people. Or just kind of hang out in certain areas, and again, rather than thinking of what can we do to get people out of this situation permanently, what can we do to eradicate homelessness in our city, it's what can we do just to get them into the prison. When my dad worked in the prison in Cincinnati, the biggest reason he was a cop for a total of 12 seconds of his life was because it was a lot of people who were in these kinds of situations where it was just they're constantly getting picked up because their existence is basically illegal. And he said it was too rough watching people just come in and out all the time for
devastating
for those basic their existence is illegal.
It's nuts. And so, okay, so say I have a car, or somebody's gonna let me take a nap in their car.
Whoops.
43% of cities prohibit sleeping in cars.
And a lot of people who are homeless do have a car. Because they were once, a lot of people were once in a decent situation and then were no longer in a decent situation.
Exactly.
And again, who are you hurting sleeping in your vehicle? That is your vehicle.
And even if it isn't your vehicle, I definitely remember, it didn't ever necessarily happen to me, but I had other friends where they didn't lock their car or something, yes. And so a homeless person got in it instead of breaking the window. Thank you.
Yes, that's why I don't lock my car.
Looking doors. Out. Mm-hmm. And rummaged around, couldn't find anything, and just took a nap in it. Because they came back and they were like, something happened in here.
Yeah, yeah.
Where'd this come from? What's going on? Why is there an empty Coke can in here? What's going on with my life? But I mean, if
Casual.
they were caught, they would have been arrested. And I mean, imagine if it's like you own the vehicle and you're for sleeping in your car. I'm
That's the
like,
one
come
that really
on.
gets me. That if that's your car, I mean, I have
Oof.
families who've slept in cars overnight. Dayton does not have this law,
Mhm.
at all. But
I've definitely had to take a nap in a car before, like on a long trip. I've definitely had to do that.
or like you have 20 minutes in between like appointments or something like that. I don't know. I've closed my eyes. The point is,
Right.
this law does not make any sense, especially it being your own vehicle. I can do whatever
It
I
also
want
just
in
doesn't
my own
help
vehicle.
anyone.
No, again, it does not eradicate homelessness. It just shifts the problem.
Right. And so last but not least, like
This
I'm
one
homeless and I
sucks.
don't have money. So like, you know what I need to survive is sustenance. So, okay, I'm hungry. Someone walks out of a restaurant with their leftovers and then they give it to me. And or the restaurant closes and they hand me like, some like leftover food that they were going to throw away, but instead of throwing it away, gave it to me. They're
9%.
9%, which is low, but like it's not zero is better. 9% of cities that prohibit sharing food with homeless people.
Which means I would
Most
be very much
schools mandate
arrested
it.
all the time. All the
Same.
time.
And I'm like, for real, like, who's getting arrested? Me, the person giving them food,
I
or the
think
homeless person accepting food?
it is the person giving them the food, because I think women were there was a group of nuns who were recently arrested for giving migrant people coming over the border in El Paso. I want to say, I think it's one of the cities with these laws. They shared
Yeah.
food and water, and they did get arrested. They are currently in
Well,
jail.
let's
That's
talk
true.
about our administration if you want to
Yeah, I mean, but
get into it.
he, I mean, to be fair, he did not arrest them. The city of El Paso did.
I
I
know,
think it
but
was El
where does it
Paso.
come
Tweet at
from?
me if
It
I'm
all comes
wrong.
together.
It
It
all
all
it
comes
does.
together.
It does. Perception really does. Um, but I tweet at me or comment on our blog if I'm wrong, if it was a different city. But I'm pretty sure it was El Paso. Um, so that's really sad because that doesn't. I don't. Again, if I
So
want to give
you
food
have
to
no
homeless
place
people,
to sleep.
yeah,
No place to sleep.
no
You
place to
can't
sit.
ask for any money.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can't even
you
sit.
can't sit down.
You can't ask for money. And then you also can't like get any food.
Someone
So
can't
like
offer you their food.
what are you supposed to do? And so people are like, oh, there's homeless shelters. Oh, there's nonprofit organizations that will help them.
And
And I just
again,
want to point out that they're not great.
no,
Nobody wants to be there.
no.
I've had to go to a homeless shelter twice to take refugees, which is a horrifying experience. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt like a monster driving away from there because this is a person who has no cultural concept of any of what's happening to them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're about to be eaten alive by whomever is in there because
And
it's a dog eat dog world in there.
again,
And
yeah, a lot of people have reported experiencing violence at some point in a homeless shelter, um, or even
yeah.
just difficulty with the staff. Just because you work at a homeless shelter does not mean that you're not without bias, or that if you're a
Or
social
that you
worker and
or you yourself were formerly homeless. Cycle health.
yeah. So I mean, that can be a very difficult situation. They also do just add up. I would encourage anybody to watch Will Smith's Pursuit of Happiness. I know it's an old film, but if you haven't seen it, that's a true story. And he does stand in line at the shelter with his son. First of all, a lot of shelters are just women and children, um, but also he stands in line and they get turned away because they only have so many beds. It just is what it is. They only
Mm-hmm.
have so much funding. So again, that's shelters are really good, band-aid to our one of our many internal bleeding problems, as I like to say. But I do think that we need to look at legislation that just eradicates homelessness.
And so, at the root of all of this, where homelessness lives, beyond just, our economy and like
Yes.
the way the structures are,
Yes.
it's really a lack of affordable housing.
Yes.
it's that housing just costs so much money
So much money, especially in
that,
the larger cities.
right. And it just ends up costing so much money, or you need to have good credit. You need to be making a certain amount of money to qualify for different things. Their waiting lists for low income housing are insane.
There are
A lot
waiting
of low
lists for
income
upper
housing,
income housing, honestly.
right? And it's like there's this issue of, if there isn't affordable housing in your area, people are going to become homeless.
Period. And
Um,
I think a good example of this is San Francisco. Josh's best friend Ray just moved from there to Austin, and he said homelessness is rapid in San Francisco because his home, his very very small home, was like $4,000 a month. Um, and
that's insane.
that's insane. That's an insane way to
Oh my
live.
god.
San Francisco was, and he didn't even live like in the city. So San Francisco is a
Ugh.
really insane rent place to live. As progressive of a city as it is, their homelessness is huge because people cannot afford to live there, and you can't afford to just up and leave a city that you live in or have always lived
Definitely.
in or have moved to,
Right.
thinking that you have a good job and then you lose that job, or that job's, honest to God, not paying you enough, which I think is oftentimes happening on the coastal regions. A lot of internships that turn out to be unpaid internships, or I make $25,000 a year kind of situations and can't afford housing without 6 roommates.
Right. And so what the study ultimately had some really, really good, like, numbers in terms of money, but basically these laws are ineffective because what ends up happening is that if someone has to go to the emergency room or jail, you know, they are costing several $1,000s. I mean, several, I'm saying like probably 20.
Yeah.
And then while assisting or providing an apartment and a social worker to overcome other obstacles, because it's more than just literally being poor and being homeless, there's so
Mm-hmm.
much else
Mm-hmm.
attached.
Mm-hmm.
The cost benefit is that 20 grand versus probably is, they estimated roughly a 10 grand. Those are your differences. Is you would cut the cost of the homelessness in your area in half by just providing an apartment and providing social programs such as a social worker or other
Or
any
a
other kind of social
therapist.
program.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
what I hope the most from this podcast, especially this war on poverty stint that we're doing right now, is that you start to really question this idea of what's fiscally responsible, and what we should be spending money on and what we do have money for. I think as Americans, we have taken for granted not looking hard, taking a hard, careful look at the budgets that our local and state and federal governments create, and where that money is allocated, because it really does not make sense fiscally the way that we're going. It doesn't make sense to allow people to stay poor, and it doesn't make sense to have these laws against people who are poor. They don't make the economy better. They don't make us any safer, because again, people are individuals, and some individuals are violent and some individuals are not, and it really does not have a correlation with homelessness or poverty or anything like that.
Yeah, if I'm
And
being
we can get you
honest,
studies on
any
that.
man approaching me,
Whether,
any man
I don't care how
approaching me
much
on the
money
street,
you have,
homeless or
or
not,
yeah, whatever,
don't
you
you
are
come up to me.
frightening to me. Yeah. So that's not valid. All of this is really to keep people poor so that rich people can stay rich. That's just the truest bottom line that there is.
And
Um,
also that rich people don't care.
yeah.
Why should they care? They got rich on their quote unquote own.
In whatever
So
story
why
that is
should
for
it
them.
matter?
Yeah. And
Right.
and again, you
Donald Trump is a man just like any of us.
in order for
You
there
know,
to
he
be
started up his business.
and
Like, come on.
in order for them there to be million and billionaires, in any economy, and this is true, and I hope that any economist would back me up, in order for there to be millionaires and billionaires, you have to have a social inequality. You have to. If you eradicate social inequality, you are also going to eradicate millionaires and billionaires, because it's just going to even the playing field. And so some people are going to come down, and the rest of us are going to come up. And that's very frightening for people who are millionaires and billionaires. It just is. And it would be, honestly, if I was a millionaire or billionaire, it might be frightening to me. I don't know. I've never had that much money. I don't know how it would affect my mindset. No, I never will. And honestly, I never hope to, because I really don't think that it, I think I actually read a study that much money makes you just as unhappy as the cycle of poverty, because it's the same kind of mindset of I just have to get more money and I'm like 30 seconds at a time. But that's a whole other podcast in and of itself. But I really just hope, bottom line, that people start to question these systems, because they don't keep us safe, they aren't fiscally responsible, and they don't move the economy. They don't make sense for anybody who isn't at a top 1% trying to make sure that there's social inequality so that they can stay on top, because somebody has to be on the bottom for somebody to be on the top. That's my soapbox.
I love it. I'm in it. I'm with you.
Speaking of getting arrested, though, we have our bail bond systems. So if you've never been arrested, which I have not, and you don't know much about, Katie neither, and you don't know much about that system, you, in order to get out of jail, you are often put up on bail. And so the judge will say you need to put up this amount of money so that we know that you will come back. It's like leaving your watch. It's like when Michael Scott wanted to leave his watch at the hot dog stand, because I will come back and get my watch and pay you.
It's a $40 for these
hot dogs. It's a $40
I can
watch.
get half your menu. Okay, I can get over half your menu.
Exactly. So that's basically what it is. And so the idea is that just making sure that people come back to, yes, you can get out of jail. You haven't been convicted of any crime. You've only been arrested, but you do have to come back. And that was the idea behind it. So great idea. However, cash bails, they're not asking you to come back for a couple bucks. They're asking you to come back for upwards of thousands of dollars out on bail.
To really simplify it, you get arrested for a crime. You're booked and processed and put into jail. Hopefully it's not a Friday, because you won't go to court till Monday. You won't speak to a judge who will hear your case to decide if this person, whoever this judge is, will decide whether you can get bail and be released and how much.
That bail is going to be.
Right. And he gets to look at you and make that determination based on the severity of the crime.
He or she.
And whatnot. She. So, so then they're going to decide, okay, your family is here at this arraignment. You don't have a vehicle. You're pretty much not a flight risk. You'll come back. So your bail is set at $2,500, $2,500.
That's a low bail.
You have to pay a certain percentage of that.
Yes.
Based on your income as well. So then you have to pay $250. Well, do you just have $250? Does the family who showed up have $250? Did anybody show up to support you?
Did you need that $250 for something else?
Did you already pay rent and you tapped out? Where you at with it? You could end up staying in jail for a long time
for a crime that you have not yet been convicted for. This is not a conviction. That was just your arraignment where they're deciding if you're getting out on bail or not. You've not been convicted of any crime.
Right. And what's also kind of crucial with this bail bond or cash bail system is that you're not really going to get this money back.
No.
That $250 gone.
Yeah.
You're not going to just get it back. Oh, you're not guilty. It wasn't you. It was some other person.
Or the cop didn't understand. Back. Yeah, no, they don't care. It's gone. It's to the government.
Right.
And I think a story that really made me realize how detrimental this bail bond system can be is many of my students are on medication. Some of whom really truly desperately need that medication in order to function. And one of my students who desperately needs their medication in order to function is taken care of by a grandparent. That grandparent was arrested on a Friday. So that grandparent had all of their money, first of all, on his person when he was arrested. So first of all, they had to wait to go get that money, even to discuss bail. Instead of being able that month to buy my student's medication, they had to put up money for bail for grandpa to get out, so my student would not go into foster care because the grandpa is the only person taking care of that student. So my student went without their needed medication for about 2 months while they were waiting for this situation to die down, in which he was found not guilty. Money that they again never got back, so that he could be out on bail. If he wasn't out on bail, she would be put in the foster care system. So this was a no-win situation for my student. She was either not going to get medication that she desperately needed to function, or she was going to go into the foster care system and still not get that medication that she desperately needed, because either way, grandpa's not there to get her the medication and file it with the doctor or anything like that. But they had to make that rock and hard place decision. Do we buy the medication that is needed, or do we get grandpa out of jail? We have to get grandpa out of jail, so that's it.
Yeah, exactly. And so, as you can see, it's kind of like a warped system that is specifically targeting
poor
a
people.
certain portion of the population. You know, like, if a rich person gets arrested for doing really horrible things and they are offered a bail, they can take it and then go continue to do those horrible things while whatever's going on. You know, like, come on.
It's not a system that makes a lot of sense. And there are a lot of other systems that we can post about on the blog that are good or alternatives, I guess I should say, to the bail bond system. Yes, you don't want people who are flight risk to flee the country or the state or wherever that they're being charged. At the same time, the bail bond system specifically does target people in poverty. And
Absolutely.
I wish I could find this article that I read, and I can't, and if I do, I will post it on the blog and tweet it. But it showed a high number. It was just about New York, a alarmingly high number of people in Rikers who were in Rikers for months and months and months, despite our speedy and fair trial laws, months and months and months, for crimes they did not yet get convicted for, which really just doesn't say innocent until proven guilty to me at all whatsoever. You are in jail for a crime that you may or may not have committed and you've not been convicted for. That's just, it's wild to me.
Right.
Because of the bail bond system.
It's just nuts. It's just nuts. So just one other thing that like touches on the bail bond. There in California last year, they did pass a law to basically dismantle the cash bail system. And that it was basically that the severity of crime or the likelihood of
flight risk,
injury to others, or flight risk would be more of the criteria. But there's still some issues just with that, just because, like, you know, who's choosing?
What's the rubric for that? Yeah.
Yeah, and, like, it depends on who's sitting there deciding that.
Which isn't that so much of our justice system anyway, but it is tough.
Totally. 1,000%. So it's, like, kind of a benefit, but, like, kind of... It has a good theory. Let's just say that. And then, just to kind of, like, touch a little bit, if you haven't seen the documentary on Netflix called 13th, then you really, really need to.
See it.
It's amazing.
I'm going to see it again.
It was so educational. It's about the 13th Amendment. And I'm not going to go really deep into it before we start talking about the war on drugs. That's what we've been leading to. But I'm going to write some stuff in the blog about it. It's just such an amazing documentary because it really also gives you such a great background on the school to prison pipeline, the bail bond system, just like how the justice system has been really warped towards a certain group of people. And if you can guess who, then you win
You
a gold
win.
star from me.
Yay, gold stars.
And that would be any African American Black person,
what?
former slave.
Crazy.
That's what that was written for. So we'll talk more about that, or just touch on different pieces of that documentary later. I don't want to spend too much time on it, just because if you haven't seen it, I'm shocked, and you must see it.
Right
and
now.
It's on Netflix, not HBO, so just saying. Anyhow.
It is on Netflix, yeah. So, and after you're done with that, watch the Fire Festival, because that stuff's crazy anyway. So you can just spend some time on Netflix.
Want a taste of millennials I've never met in my life. Watch the Fire Festival.
Yeah, want to watch the opposite of the cycle of poverty? That's, Fire Festival.
Literally.
It's just so blowing my mind this week, and I can't even get over it.
I know. I'm going to text you after I finish watching it. Anyway.
Okay, crazy. Literally so crazy. Anyway, so this has all been building up. Katie and I have talked about something that we're both passionate about talking about, which is the war on drugs. And the war on drugs and the war on poverty are very closely aligned. But the war on drugs really brings us back to our initial conversations of race, and people who are non-white, Black and Chinese, actually, and Mexican or Hispanic, really being targeted through this idea that drugs are bad and terrible, and certain drugs are worse than others. Not necessarily based in science. Actually, I shouldn't even say not necessarily. Definitely not based in science, but based on definitely not based in science, but based on a pseudoscience, which basically targets what races use what drugs, and then deciding what races are non-white and therefore deserve to go to jail. And that might sound really like I'm oversimplifying something, but honestly, when we do our next podcast on the war on drugs and get deep into it, you will see I am not oversimplifying that at all. That's exactly what the war on drugs was. That's exactly what President Nixon intended for the war on drugs, and it's exactly what was continued to be perpetuated by every single president after him. So we are going to get into that really more in our next podcast. And just really outline for everyone what that looks like. But if it's not anything you've ever looked into, and you've not seen the 13th, and you've not done any readings on, like, if you're a 90s kids, the DARE program, what a joke that was. We'll talk about that as well. I really think the first time that I started to learn about this, my mind was super blown. That was the first time I was like, that's some conspiracy level shit right there. That's just real, like, that's some really deliberate oppression, like Jim Crow times a million right there.
Yep.
So that's going to be a rough episode if that's not something that you're familiar with, but I think it's really important for all of us to know, because the more I'm going to keep saying it, you can't unknow what you know, and the more that we are aware of these things, the more we're going to vote with them in mind. And the more we're going to run with them in mind.
Yeah. When I was studying, because my degree is in human rights. So I know too much about a lot of things. And I very quickly realized
what you know.
I can't shop anywhere anymore. It was like, all of a sudden, it was like, I literally can't live. And then it was like learning too much about, like, carbon footprint and, like, all these things. And I was like, how do I live? And then it was like, I basically went to my professor and I was like, I can't do a damn thing. And she was like, okay, let's dial it back. And I was like, okay, can we talk about this as a class, like in our next class?
But it is hard.
Please, because I'm learning too much and I know too much, and I can't, like, I do need underwear, and where do I buy it from?
It's like that kid on The Giver.
I need cotton. Where do I
where do we get cotton? Where do I get cotton? Where can I get afford a non-carbon footprint
American
zipper?
Apparel only.
Oh God, well, American Apparel has its own issues. Everything is problematic. We won't go down that rabbit hole.
Anyway.
Yeah. So overall, again, please start questioning these cycle of poverty and these anti-homelessness and anti-poverty legislation pieces that we have. I encourage everybody to look into their personal city, look into laws on homelessness, look into bail bond systems, and encourage legislators to start looking into alternatives. I don't think we have Like I said, we'll post some alternatives on the blog. I don't think there is a perfect one, but there certainly has to be one out there better than the one that we have right now. And that goes
Totally.
for most of the legislation that we're working with. But that's why local elections are so important, and asking your
Yeah.
local officials about these issues, and about what they've been doing to eradicate homelessness in your area, or to help
Mhm.
people out of a cycle of poverty, or to make sure the city's schools are strong, and helping kids get out of that cycle of poverty, and helping families get out of that cycle of poverty. Um,
It's all connected. It's basically that's what it is. It's all connected, which is why we did this in the order that we did. We weren't gonna just open on more on drugs. We can't start you guys there.
nope, we had to
We
take
got
it
to
back.
start down. We got to start lower, move
Take it
our
back.
way up.
It's called scaffolding, by the way, in case anyone's curious. Where's scaffolding for you? It's my teacher word. I'm on maternity leave. I don't have enough teacher things right now. Okay. Well, anyway, thank you so much for listening. Again, takeaways here are to definitely get involved in your local politics, and asking your local politicians about these issues. If you don't know already, what your city or township or whatever, wherever you live, where they stand on these kinds of things. And next up is the war on drugs. So
Yep, it's
get
gonna be a
pumped.
good one.
It is gonna be a wild ride. So we will see you next. Happy 2019, and look for our blog. Thanks, guys.
Yep, we'll have all the blogs, all the tweets,
All of them.
and we do tweet about like things that are happening currently.
Yes.
We can't be doing podcasts about every single thing that's happening,
As
and
fast
we
as they're
have to
happening,
do
and the 24-hour news
because
cycle is
we
overwhelming.
yeah, we need everyone to kind of get up to a certain level with
And
us.
then we'll go there.
And then, maybe we can do a little bit more of that.
Then we can Covington Catholic the shit out of all of it. So we won't go there. Because we're not there yet. We're not there. So yeah. So like we said, please follow us on Twitter, because we do tweet, and we retweet a lot of really important people and a lot of really important articles about current events that don't have to do with what we're talking on the podcast
necessarily, but are definitely things that we either are going to get to,
or just important.
So, yep. So usual thing, our email, if you want to be a guest on our show, hit us up. Whatever your heart desires, 2whitegirlshow@gmail.com. Our blog is 2whitegirlshow.wordpress.com, and then the Twitter is 2whitegirlshow, SHO1 and not SHW. I don't know, Liv. That's our Twitter handle. Tweet us, email us, comment on our blog, read our blog, subscribe to the YouTube channel, please. Love you.
And I think we're soon to get a SoundCloud, is what I'm hearing. So hopefully we're soon to move forward off of YouTube. But for now, subscribe to YouTube, please. All right. Thank you, listeners. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.